So after my last video discussing the new Valheim Adventure map, I had a brief discussion with one of its creators, 9byte, and I decided to give it another try after learning what the rules of the map were. And what I want to do in this video is just kind of compare and contrast my initial experience with my new experience, and then provide some feedback into areas where I think the map could be improved, which would probably alleviate most of the issues that I had in my first run. And I think I've seen, or I know I've had a couple other people, at least a couple other people tell me they've had in their first runs. So let's first start off by saying what happened in the first run. The first run, I downloaded the map, jumped in and started playing. And it took me, I think, about 4.5 hours to get to Eikthyr because there was no clear indication in the game that I was supposed to just follow the road blindly to get to Eikthyr. So my second playthrough was completely different. And what happened in my second playthrough was, before I played it, I went onto the Discord for the game, or for the map, and I read through all the little information there that kind of explained what you're supposed to do and everything like that, and I followed the rules. So once I knew the rules, I jumped in and I started playing. And here's what happened. So I started off by fully exploring the starting POI, which I had done in my previous run, and then I followed the road, only ever leaving it if there was a building right on the edge of the road. So essentially, unless there was like a little shack or something, or one of the little stone structures, like right on the edge of the road where I could walk off the road for a few steps and get to it, I ignored everything else. I didn't go wandering off in the woods. I didn't gather resources. I didn't go looking for fighting enemies or any kind of stuff like that, because now I knew that I was just supposed to stay on the road and everything I needed would be along the way. So this time, rather than taking about 4.5 hours to get to the Eikthyr spawn, it only took me 90 minutes to reach Eikthyr, and that was clearing all of the POIs on the way. So there's a couple of, I think there's one or two major POIs, there's one or two, I think there's two major POIs on the way to the Eikthyr spawn. There's also a bunch of like little camps and stuff like that. So I went through all of them, thoroughly searched them. I don't think I got 100% of the stuff, but I got everything that I needed. I got all the food I needed. I got some gear, upgrades, stuff like that. Then I reached Eikthyr. So it was far more efficient than my previous run, and there were some issues, but I'll talk about those a little bit later on. So what happened was, I got to Eikthyr spawn, and then I went back to the little village that was right before it, and I saved, and that's where I quit for the time being. I came back a few hours later, and I did the Eikthyr fight, which was far more challenging than the regular Eikthyr fight. So I'll give them props to that. It was definitely a good fight. There were a bunch of little ads in there. I'm not going to show any footage from the Eikthyr fight because I don't want to spoil it for anybody that wants to do it themselves. But it was definitely a more challenging fight. The only issue that I had with the Eikthyr fight was, as I was trying to get away from his attacks, I ended up in a spot, which I'll just describe without showing. There's a spot where there's like behind like the overhangs where they are, and I was standing back there, and Eikthyr literally could not reach me because he was just tall enough that his antlers were getting stuck on the overhang, and I was able to just sit there and shoot him with my arrow, or go back there, arrows, and then basically just go back there and recover my stamina and health before going out and meleeing him. I did end up running out of arrows, so I did have to take down probably like a third to half of his health with melee weapons, which was perfectly fine because at that point I had already cleared all of the ads that were there. So that was the only minor issue with the fight, except after I killed him, a phrase pops up on the screen, and I had forgotten, because I had taken a couple-hour break between reading the NPC message right before the fight and doing the fight, that I was supposed to pay attention to what the words that came out were. So I needed to name a portal, the one specific word, and I couldn't remember what it was. Fortunately for me, I had recorded it, so I was able to go back to my recording, type in the name into the portal, and I was able to access the loot area after that, and then that ends up taking you back to the original spawn area, which would save a ton of time, because otherwise what I would have had to have done was get out of the... I ended up figuring a way to get out in case I couldn't figure out what the word was. So you can actually parkour out. There's a way to get out of it, but you'd have to walk all the way back to the starting area, and you would miss the loot that's in between the Eikthyr fight and then getting back to the starting area. So I guess I could just mention this right now. I think it's definitely there needs, I don't know how there's a way to work around this, because you do need to know the names of the portals. But this wouldn't have happened had I just talked to the guy and then went and fought him right away. But because I took a couple-hour break, when it did a bunch of things, I completely forgot that I was supposed to remember the words. So that was the only issue, but it was a really good fight and definitely more fun than the regular Eikthyr fight. So after I did that, I returned back to the original POI. I got the Stag Breaker, and I accessed the Adventurers Guild, and then I headed to the bridge that was blocked and cleared a path, because that's what it told me to do. And basically, you just need to get the pickaxe. So of course, you get the pickaxe from killing Eikthyr, so the pickaxe allowed me to clear the bridge. I went through, followed the path. I ended up getting back to that POI, the POI that I had found in my initial run that I was not supposed to be at that point, which was the one with all the little circlings in it. I cleared that one, continued traveling down, and then ran into another POI that was like I'm not gonna I don't want to spoil too much, but I ran into another POI that had several buildings in it that were up in trees. Did the little quest the guy told me to do there, and then I continued along the path again until I eventually got to a point where there was a dock that tells you. Then there's boats sitting there, and you're supposed to get in the boat and sail across the ocean. I ended up not doing that because it was it would end for I don't know if it was intentional or just how it happened to be my timing. There was a horrible storm right when I was going to get on the boats. So what I ended up doing was I just saved and stopped, and that's where I've stopped playing at this point. So I haven't made it to the outer yet. I'm assuming I'll be getting into the outer sooner rather than later. But it took me 90 minutes to get to Eikthyr, and then from the Eikthyr fight, which is included in the fight, to get to the point where I stopped playing, I believe was another 2 to 2.5 hours. I didn't record all of that, but roughly, I think I spent somewhere between 3.5 and 4 hours to get to where I was. In my run up to this point, I had only died one time, and it was literally right before the dock. So there's a little point of interest right before the dock. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but you'll probably know why I died at that point of interest. I died to something, and I was like, you got to be joking. And then I had to run all the way back because the previous point, my previous respawn point was quite a ways back, so I had to run back all the way over there. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But I will just say this: my experience knowing the rules was 100 times better, infinitely better than the initial experience. So let's talk about how that could be, how it could be avoided, or how my initial experience could be avoided, so this doesn't happen to other people. So I guess I'll start off by saying that when I play a game, my expectations are that I will be somehow not, I don't want my hand like completely held that says go do this, go do that, and everything like that from the beginning all the way to the end of the game. But I feel like the game should definitely give you an idea of what you're supposed to be doing. So like in the background, I'm showing footage of, I just created a new save today, and just to show like the early game of actual Valheim. So of course you could drop down into a little spawn area, and the first thing that happens is Hugin the Raven starts telling you things. There's a stone there that immediately shows you the location of the first boss. He tells you need to gear up before fighting him, and that's kind of like it tells you what you need to do in the first biome. Now, of course, anybody who's played the game will know after the first biome, they don't just tell you where the next boss is. You usually have to go exploring out, and then you'll eventually either stumble upon it or you will find one of the stones that lets you locate the boss spawn, and you can go there. But after that, I said I wanted to refresh my memory to see what would happen when I went to a Black Forest. So I ran a little bit of a distance away to get to the Black Forest. And of course, you'll see in the background, as soon as you get to the Black Forest and it pops up, Hugin drops in again and tells you that you're in the Black Forest and you should definitely be fighting Eikthyr before you go there because it's dangerous. And then as he starts talking, I immediately get assaulted by two Grey Dwarves, and the only thing I have in my hand is the torch that you start with. So fortunately, I was able to hold them off with the torch and kill them and get away. But basically, when you play the game, it explains to you, hey, you shouldn't be here because it's probably too dangerous. Not that you can't go in there, but it's definitely not advised to go in there because you haven't cleared the first biome. So that was kind of the mindset that I had going into the adventure map because I didn't know all the rules. Now, how can this be alleviated? This was something I already mentioned in the 9byte in my conversation, and I'm going to reiterate it here, is that in the tutorial area at the beginning of the adventure map where there's all the dialogue and stuff like that, I think it would be very helpful if the main rules of the map were included there to avoid any type of confusion. And by this, I would mean one thing saying, always stay on the road, like no matter what. Because intuition from anybody who's played Valheim would be, even if I know I'm supposed to be, well, I mean, you wouldn't, I guess you follow the road because it tells you to go to the bridge and then you start following the path. But my intuition of having played the game would be, once I reach the second biome and I know that I hadn't killed the first boss, intuitively I'm thinking this doesn't make any sense to me. That's why I got confused. If they just tell you, hey, just follow the road, everything will be okay, then that'll save a lot of trouble. The other one's going to be that I think they should tell you that it's completely 100% optional and actually not required and probably not advised to participate in things you would normally be doing in a Valheim playthrough, which would be gathering resources, crafting and upgrading gear, and building. All that is completely optional. Those were things, again, I did in my first playthrough. I went out and killed a bunch of deer and a bunch of boar so I could craft upgraded stuff because I didn't know that when I got to the next area, all the loot I was going to need was going to be there. So those two rules alone, putting them in the tutorial area, I think would alleviate 99% of the frustration I had in my first playthrough. Next up is going to be the path. I think the path could be better with one of two ways. And again, I already reiterated this to 9byte, at least some of this, but in video games, a general design principle for video games, especially like open world games, if you want to, or even like, it could even be linear, I guess, as this experience is going to be. would be if you want to keep people's attention and keep them actively engaged, you want to have something of interest popping up every 30 to 40 seconds, something like that. Generally 30 seconds, because the longer you go, the worse it's going to be. And the one issue I had while playing this was, and in the background, I'm showing footage of one particular stretch that I just remembered. You'll often go long distances or long time periods without running into anything interesting while following this path because the path is quite long. There's going to be a major point of interest, which is really well designed, and you'll spend a decent amount of time in there. Then you'll leave that, and there might be a couple of like small points of interest along the way, but sometimes there's not. The clip that I'm showing in the background, I ran for nearly 3 minutes, and the only thing that I ran into were the little shack on the side of the road that has mushrooms in it, which you can honestly completely ignore because most of the time there's nothing in them, and a single grayling that ran into my path in the course of almost 3 minutes of running. That's far too long to be running. So the suggestion I would have would be either to add more small POIs along the way or to shorten the road somehow. Now, of course, I know shortening the road's probably going to be a lot more work because the road's already been built and points of interest have been laid upon them. But one of those two things I think would keep interest. I would suggest as an option, because generally what you would do is put like resources or something or put enemies in the way. But honestly, because for me, once I only really fought the enemies in the points of interest, all the enemies along the road, they essentially just, they didn't provide any value because the resources they were dropping, I don't need. I don't need wood. I don't need gray dwarf eyes. I don't need resin because I'm not crafting anything or upgrading anything because the map's already giving you all that stuff that you need. So what I did was I just ignored all the fights and I just kept running past most of them. Occasionally I would stop because they would literally just not stop chasing, but more often than not, unless I was in a point of interest and needed to clear the enemies, I would avoid all fights along the road because there's no reason to fight them. So I don't know about putting more enemies in the road would probably just not really fix it, but those are just kind of my feedbacks on the overall like loop that I went through for the first couple of hours. I would also suggest having more respawn points. So when you go to the little camps, it kind of tells you, hey, you should leave some loot here just in case something happens. So I did that periodically in my first 90 minutes getting to Eikthyr. And what ended up happening was I left behind a lot of stuff at the different rest points, but the one that was right before Eikthyr, I didn't really have anything to leave there. So I went in, and fortunately I was able to kill him, but later on, when I ended up having a single death, what happened was I had to respawn quite a while back. It was probably, I want to say maybe like a 5 to 10 minute run, something like that. I'm just trying to remember. It was quite a long run. I didn't have any gear at that point left over because I had been leaving it along the way, and I wasn't picking up all this extra gear because really you don't have that much inventory space in Valheim, especially when you're carrying like a bunch of individual things. So I had to run from that point of interest all the way to where my my grave was to grab my stuff with no armor on, no weapons, and I found a couple of I think I found some berries or something, or I think there was a mushroom and a berry bush like right outside where I was. So I was able to eat those just to get my stamina up, ran back and got my stuff. So I feel like more respawn points, this would probably help address the issue of having not a lot of stuff in between. So maybe there's more camps along the way just so you can save your respawn point. I mean, it won't always help because you're not going to always leave gear behind, but it will certainly at least reduce the time of running back and forth, because I'm assuming that especially people who probably don't have a lot of time in the game, they're probably going to die way more often than I did. I mean, I'm pretty well versed in the game. I have over 500 hours. So I know all the enemies I'd run into. I know their attack patterns. I know how to avoid them. And I only died to something that honestly I've never even encountered before because it's not something that's in the base game right now. So that's kind of my feedback on that. The last point of feedback is going to be that I know it's geared toward, I feel like it's geared towards co-op, especially when you go into the first, into the, the inn or something, and it kind of tells you, hey, you should have people have different roles. So I kind of get the impression that the map is designed to play with probably like 4 people or something like that. I was playing completely solo the whole time. And I know you can play it solo, but some of the designs of the points of interest were a bit confusing in this matter because some of them had a lot of loot and others had very limited loot. So as an example, one of them had a bunch of troll capes. I think there was like 10 troll capes like sitting on little stands. So that would mean if you had a party of 10 people, each person could get one. But then there was another point of interest where I only found 2 weapons and 1 shield. And I don't know if that was meant to be like, oh, one person gets this weapon, one person gets this weapon, and somebody gets the shield. But then what about the other people that are playing? They don't get weapon upgrades at that point. So I think it almost needs to be like each point of interest needs to have enough for everybody. So I don't know how you would do that, because honestly, a lot of the points of interest were, there were some compact buildings. There were some of the I guess one more thing would be some of the buildings, while they look really cool, they're kind of tough to navigate because there's some really tight spaces, especially going upstairs and stuff like that. There was a couple spots where I kept getting stuck, and I had to like finagle my way to get through the opening that I needed to get through. Nothing like terrible, but just something to kind of mention. And that where it might be hard to kind of put all the loot, because the place where I found the 2 weapons and the shield was in this like this little shack that was up in a tree, and I don't even know if there was room. There was definitely not room unless they put them in the chest of having all the loot, which there's probably a way of solving it because there are lots of chests in most of these POIs. So that's kind of the main feedback that I have for the map. I will say that, I guess I'll say this, like, would I recommend it, or do I change my opinion on it? For me personally, I don't feel like this map is designed for somebody like me. It's not something that I'm going to enjoy playing because I'm not a fan of, I guess, linear handholdy experiences, which is what kind of like a lot of more modern games do, where it's like, if you play an old school RPG, and I know there's new RPGs coming out, like as an example, Dragon's Dogma 2 is coming out shortly after I'm recording this. That game is supposed to have like no hand holding at all. But a lot of games now, they'll just kind of like put a waypoint on the map and tell you exactly where to go. And in this case, if you just follow the road, you will always get to where you need to go. Just follow the road. Don't deviate from the path. You'll get there. Some people enjoy that kind of thing. It's not my kind of thing. So if that's the kind of thing you enjoy, if you just want to go through kind of like a story thing and not really, to me, it's like it's in the Valheim world, but it's not like you just have to forget everything you know about Valheim, other than the fact of like how the enemies attack and stuff like that. But all the crafting and all that kind of stuff, just throw that out the window. If you just want to run like through a story, then definitely play it. If you're like me and you're looking more for like a survival experience, something like that, then I don't recommend playing this because you're not going to get the survival experience out of it unless you kind of like force it, which doesn't make sense because that's not how it was designed. So I guess my conclusion here is that knowing there's 2 versions of this, there is an MMO version, and while I haven't done a lot of research on the MMO version, the MMO version was what I had seen in the video that I watched. That's what most of it was focused on, the MMO version, where they were talking about how they took stuff from the MMO version, the builds, and made this adventure map. But the MMO version has classes and stuff like that. There's respawnable loot. You can farm bosses and stuff like that. And it sounds like a more Valheim experience to me. Again, I don't know everything about it, but it does sound like a more Valheim experience to me. So I feel like the MMO version would be far more interesting to me. Now, I do have one big concern about the MMO version, and this is directly quoted from the Discord, 9bytes Discord. And again, I just want to put this out there. Like, this is my only concern right now with it. It says, the other version is an MMORPG style 100-person live server. The world is open world and locations and loot reset here, so you can go back to them over and over, and you will fight bosses with raiding parties like an MMO. And this will initially only be designed for a server, but eventually will be offered for free also. So everything up until that very last couple of words is like, cool, that's what I'm looking for a game. I would definitely be interested in that. But I am a bit concerned that I think right now that the only way to get access to it, or the only way to get access to it at the beginning, is going to be to pay for it. And the reason I'm concerned about that is I'm almost positive that that is against terms of service on Steam. And also it would probably fall under copyright infringement, because looking into other games, if you look at games that have mods, all the mods are free for games. Like, if you can go on Nexus Mods or the Steam Workshop, all those mods are free. You can, sometimes mod creators will have like a, here's my Patreon page or whatever. And I think 9byte, I'm not sure about the other creators. 9byte has like channel memberships where you can support it. That's perfectly cool. Listen, I'm all for people making money. I'm making a YouTube video right now. So making YouTube videos on it, having whatever, like a way to support people. Cause I said when I first saw this, I'd be willing to pay for this thing. But I think it should also be 100% free, because the worst thing that can happen is, imagine you are paying for this and then you put a lot of time into it, and then Irongate, who's the developers, or Steam find out about it, and they're like, wait a minute, this is not kosher, and they just decide to just take it down, and then it's gone. So that's my only concern right now. It looks like it's much more interesting, but I would be concerned about the legal ramifications of selling access to a mod for a game that you have not created yourself. So I guess I'll wrap it up by saying that like I said, if what I've talked about, what you've seen, what you saw in my first 2 videos, my frustration in the first video was all because I didn't know the rules. If they just kind of fix the early expectations, or set the expectations at the very beginning in the game itself, not requiring people to go to a Discord or some other outside source, like a different location other than in the game, to learn all the rules, I think that would make this experience better for everyone, because there will be no confusion over what you're supposed to do. Most of the time you'll find everything. And I guess one more thing that I forgot to mention was, there were some points where I clicked on the maps and they were supposed to add locations to my map, and I don't remember them always working. I think the first bridge showed up, and then the one POI showed up, but then there was another one that did not show up properly. So I don't know if I don't think I did anything wrong, but that kind of stuff is like, you'll usually find those, but there is always the possibility that like somebody could like miss the first one for the bridge because it is sitting right by a door, and I think it could be very easy to walk past it. But generally, everything else kind of lined up. As long as you know the rules, follow the road, and that's it. Follow the road and save often, and then just you'll get enough loot along the way and get enough food. Now, I will say that in playing by myself, there was a decent amount of food and stuff like that. I'm not sure if there was enough food for 10 people, so I don't know how the scaling would go, but like I said, if you're into like an adventure map or whatever like that, then definitely certainly play this. If you're looking for a Valheim experience and a custom map, then I still would not recommend it. So it's going to be kind of up to you. Again, I'm going to be interested to see if there's a way to try the MMO version. And like I said, hopefully they don't get it. Hopefully it becomes free and everybody can try it out. And like I said, if I end up liking it, I'd be certainly happy to support the creators on Patreon or however I could support them, at least as a one-time like donation to help support their work, because they did put quite a bit of work into it. So anyway, if you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the like button. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.